Hello everyone, a very good afternoon. This is Priyal Bhatia. I'm the Chief Community Officer for DPO Club, and welcome to DPO Club webinar series. Our today webinar is going to be on the BRD for consent management under DPDPA and what are the key requirements. For this particular webinar, today we have an expert with us. Welcome Binoj Koshy sir. He is a vice president for Cyber Saro at Saro Consulting, and he is also an advisor to DPO Club. So, welcome, sir. We are very honored to have you today with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Before
Pleasure.
we start the discussion, I would like to request all the attendees here to make the session as engaging as possible. So please feel free to drop your comments and any questions that you have, and we'll try to cover most of them in lieu of time. So I think, sir, because I think this is a very, very important and very hot topic in the industry right now. So just to set the context here for our audience, what exactly is consent BRD? Why is it important, and what implications is it going to have?
Okay. Yeah. Prior to that, I'll just make a background of this whole aspect. You're aware that the DPDP Act, the bill, came in August 2023. Subsequent to that, an act in India is not recognized till the time there is a regulation in place or a rule in place. Now, it's almost been 2 years now, over 2 years now, that we have not yet been able to bring out the. That because of the fact that the dynamics of privacy in India is quite huge. Mind you, we're going to manage 1.4 billion people through this act. And in recent past, such an act has never been passed over with respect to what the Constitution did offer by virtue of Article 50. We did have the privacy rights, but if you see the Supreme Court judgment that came out after the Justice Puttaswamy had gone to court with regard to the privacy as a fundamental right, you would see that there is a lot of dynamics in the word privacy. First of all, for the fact that data privacy, primarily because of the fact that the data today of any citizen or any Indian today or any corporate house in India is more digitized today. We no more follow a paper form. Now, more and for the fact that since it is digital, it becomes more difficult now to secure this data and make it more privacy conscious and protected from the privacy violations. Now, the rule, as you're aware, did come out in January 2025. The draft rule was available. It was available till 18th of February for comments from the public. Then, of course, up to 5th March, it got extended. Now, we are sitting today in July, first week of July. Yet we don't have a rule. So the act is of no use till the time the rule or the regulation is in place. Now, the very fact that consent, as I told you, the Indian privacy journey is going to be driven by the consent aspect of it. Now, that becomes a vital aspect. So, since the rules are getting delayed due to consultations, due to dynamics in it, to the fear that some businesses may suffer, or there might be a lot of cases, judicial review that may happen on the law, the consent aspect became a primary factor. And that's how the government of India thought that let's prepare the industry or give them our mindset as to what we are hinting at by virtue of implementing this law in the country. Yeah, Priya.
Right, sir. I think thank you very much for setting this entire context. I think it's very important for people to know where this is actually coming from. So I think building onto that, my next question is, what is the need for government through any GD to bring out a BRD document even before the rule is notified?
Okay. Firstly, this 35-page document of the business requirement document that has come out is not going to be part of the act or the rule. It is non-binding as far as the act and the rule or the rule when it comes is concerned. Yet, the significance of consent is going to drive the privacy implementation journey in India. So, hence, and also you would have seen there's a lot of hue and cry on why the rule has not come out as yet. Why is the government delaying it so much when the rules were already commented upon by people? And also, is MeitY sleeping over it, or is the government of India sleeping over it? Just to get that uh, stigma away from the government of India, they thought that let's prepare the industry for what is going to happen. And it's actually a good thing. In many countries across the world, you would see that the rule comes out and then they start implementing. But by virtue of the act being there for almost 2.5 years now, and the rule being with us, the draft rule being with us from January onwards of this year, we see that there is a requirement of keeping the environment center side, because a lot of business patterns are going to change, a lot of attitudes are going to change, a lot of rights of citizen would I generally keep telling that for a privacy right, India is the most cheapest country for a judicial remedy. Okay, so you'll find even a rickshaw wala standing beside you telling मैं कोर्ट ले जाऊंगा. That is going to be the attitude of what is going to happen when the law comes into place. So consent became a very insignificant fact, and government of India knows that to implement consent, it is only the corporate houses and the business houses and the institutions across the country that has to implement, rather than a person or the government trying to implement. But for the fact that the whole world is watching us, and the requirement was to bring out this document to set the industry in the theme of things, so that they start preparing and be ready to take this journey forward and to help government of India to achieve this aim. Yeah. Yep.
Right. I think I'll just take a moment to also welcome our other speaker here. So Akarsh Singh here has joined us as a speaker, and he's the founder and CEO for Saru Consulting. So welcome, Akarsh.
Hi everyone. I got pulled in as Colonel Koshy was alone today, so I thought maybe a lot of you will have questions. So
Thank
I'll
you for
just
coming in.
hi Colonel. It's good to see you. Thank you, Priyal, for pulling me. Yeah, let's get going. Let's get
So
going.
right. So I think Akarsh, my next question can be to you. Can you just bring out the key elements of this consent BRD?
Sure. I would let Colonel take this question, and I will pick up the next question. I'm just setting up my this thing. I'll just come
Uh,
Okay,
closer to just setting
not
up
an
my mic.
issue.
I'll just.
okay. Okay. Priya, let me reiterate here for the audience that this BRD, or this business requirement document, is non binding. It has nothing to do with the act, it has nothing to do with the rules, but it is a significant document. And if you look at that 35 pages, lot of effort has gone into it. And the purpose behind this is clear and simple. It is to provide the technical and the functional framework so that the corporate houses or the implementers will develop and implement consent. One, in terms of processes and businesses within the enterprise. Next is to have the consent management system. And the third thing is to make citizens or the residents of India aware that you are going to get that right which is legitimately yours. So it is a guide to the data principle, that is you and me. It is a guide to the data fiduciary. It is a guide to the data processors. It is the guide to developers who are going to make systems robust. It is also trying to tell you that it is going to be user centric, and also the very fact that the consent has to be managed in the true spirit which government of India wants to implement. Yeah, that is.
Right. And also, sir, if I think you can throw some light here for our audience, that how do you think that this consent, uh, in the context of India's DPDP law, is any different from that of, let's say, EU GDPR? What are
Yeah.
the key differences here?
Okay. The aspect of consent does exist in the GDPR as well as in the DPDP Act per se. But if you look at the fact, if you do a search on consent in our act, you will find 52 mentions, including the consent manager. But if you do a search on the GDPR, you may get about 8 or 9 or 10, 20 or so. The concept of consent manager doesn't explicitly exist in the GDPR. But whereas para 2 of the act clearly defines what a consent manager is all about. So in GDPR, I don't know per se if you really have to appoint a consent manager. But when I look at the act and the rule and the way this BRD has been written, I'm very sure that even the smallest of enterprise, even if it is an MSME, or a school or a management, like we had how counselors came into elementary schools in India, similar, we are going to have a consent manager. It may not be a permanent designation, but he or she will have an office. She will also have a setup, a portal, a login to the website that is going to face the resident. Let's say, for example, Airtel. If Airtel were to implement this consent as a process part of the act, they need to appoint a consent manager, and that also will evolve to being part of the citizen facing or the resident facing website, wherein the consent can be reviewed, it can be withdrawn, it can be modified, and so forth, as the act mentions on the consent part. I hope it is clear, Priyal, what I'm trying to mention here.
Absolutely. Akash, do
Yeah.
you want to add anything? Okay, I think
Hey, hi,
Singh has,
Priyal. Hi.
yeah.
So
Do you
sorry.
want to add something to this?
I will again miss this one and go to the next one. Yeah.
Okay, not an issue. So I think, sir, how you mentioned that, it proves that all the entities, whether in India, whether it's a big entity or a small one, they will have to appoint a consent manager. Also, how do you think this is going to, cause the firm? Like, what are the actions that would be there for the enterprise's end?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, looking at the
I
very
will I will
fact.
add on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously Colonel Koshy when he answers, he's also a lawyer, right? So me being an engineer, I'll take this from a technical perspective, right? More from a engineering, productization, operationalization. And my focus generally inside the firm and at Saro is generally a lot more onto operations, and I let the law firms do the legal job, right? And they are the best in that. So where we are headed in terms of a consent BRD, and when I read more about it, right, when I went through more about it, I think what we can see is a certain expectations of MeitY coming down in terms of written documents in a competition that they have done for their startup hub, right? So when we see and read them in detail, it kind of gives a certain perspective. And there are two types of organizations. And I think Colonel will agree with me, and Priyal, you will agree with me also. There are two types of organizations. One type of organizations are who are just going to onboard a product, right? And as Saro, we are doing this, these are bread, butter, breakfast, right? You could call it. So we work with One Trust, Go Trust, most of them, right? Security. So what happens is these guidelines now are picked up by all these platform players. Right? And all these platform players, what they have done is in their own consent structures, they kind of started mapping back whether they can provide all the features or not, right? Like in terms of cookie, in terms of retention, cookie explaining the cookie, giving notification whether the consent has been taken, right? So this is step one. So step one is when you buy, a customer buys, and I'm talking about a enterprise, right? Not the enterprise customer. So enterprise, when they buy a product for consent management, the consent management product owners is to be compliant, right? Have certain guidelines fixed. But the second piece of this is when people are, see, we are Indians, right? And I'm right now in Noida, and Colonel is sitting in Bangalore. So I think what I'm trying to say is we are very proud people in our technology prowess. So a lot of my friends who are DPOs have also started building their own product on consent. I think it's a nightmare for them now because now while they already have a business requirement document. Now they at least have a consent BRD more clear, and I hope they had not already built their platforms who are not flexible. But if they have built it or they are planning to build it, I think now they have a lot more clarity on how to build their platforms, give the features required to be able to comply to DPDP Act, right? And I think generally, I always say the same thing to all my friends, competitors, customers, people who I know as DPOs. Focus on your own business, right? Let privacy tooling. Let's just buy and do on, right? Because you have thousand options in SaaS, thousand options in on-prem. What happens is we start focusing on our non-major business components, and we start focusing on things like like start building privacy products. Right? It doesn't help, right? Because you're not going to sell it. You're not going to go ahead with that. And think about things getting complicated, right? I feel like we are just hitting the tip of the iceberg. We have requirements from MeitY. The next requirement will be from the next regulator. The next requirement will be from the next RBI, then SEBI, then IRDA, and as beautifully said in India, if you are doing financial transactions as an organization around that, you are God save you, right? And I'm saying this out of fun as well. Yeah, back to you, Colonel Koshy.
Yeah. Thanks, Akash, for adding a new perspective to it. Let me take out the question and do a threadbare of the question that Priyal had asked. Firstly, the BRD document that exists is right enough for a corporate house or for an industry that wants to implement consent and who is not exposed to consent to transcribe this into a tender document. So the RFPs can just be picked up from those queues and points, and the RFP request for proposal can be made, and a tender can be floated. That is one. Secondly, consulting companies now know how I need to consult and ensure that this transcribes into adaptation. Implementation industry, as insofar as they are concerned, let me take a simple example of Airtel now having adopting incorporating consultancy. Now what one has to do, I have to create a login for a person who's coming to take a Airtel sim. Okay, now he's got a portal for himself. Alongside, there is another username, password, and an ID that has to be created for managing the consent part. Now, from a technology perspective, you need a consent management system, a total system in place that will include processes, it would include technology stackings, and also probably the UI, GUI, the UX UI part of it. So, all this will come under the CMS part, content management system. Now, insofar as the data principle is concerned, it's very important now that by virtue of what Airtel will throw to you, that you have to make a separate login for consent management. And now, what are the rights under the consent management? How can I go and now modify my consent? How can I go now and review my consent? How can I go now and withdraw my consent? All this will have to be taught to the data principle, because each website will look different, each login will look different, each consent management system may have a different. So now there is a beautiful ecosystem that is going to come up around the consent, and the BRD document has given a stepping stone to this particular aspect. Yeah, Priya, over to you.
Sorry. So I said, I think in the end, you have also kind of covered what I wanted to know next. So while we have the BRD document like BRD for consent management with us now. How do you think it's going to, what is going to be the future trajectory? What are going to be the future pathways to this now?
Okay. Uh, it's a very good culminating question, and there's no better way to conclude this webinar by virtue of that question. Again, we don't know how many iterations the rule is going to undergo. Today, in the papers, you would have read that the Advocate General, yesterday's paper, that the Advocate General has has asked for the file because there are two lacunas in this. Government of India doesn't want to make a law, do not want to make a law that will get challenged in the judiciary and then undergo a judicial review and get things cancelled or catch things, or the court will ask the government to go and revise it and come back, or they may remove certain things. Now the problem with the DPDP Act and the rule is that they are all interlinked from the provisions of penalty to how it is to be implemented, what is the right, what is the definitions of fiduciary processor principle. So all these are interlinked. So if the judicial review was to be done, and like in the IT Act, section 66A got abrogated in totality, and after that, Shreya Singhal went to the Bombay High Court by virtue of she commenting on some politician. Now, 66A was abrogated in complete and said the right of the citizen to comment on anybody on the social media is the right of the individual, something like that. So, similarly, the government of India does not want a hodgepodge. It does not want a broken law or looking at the way it has to be implemented. Consent is an old story. Even in 2011, we had the framework for consent in place, part of uh, the IT Act rule regulations that were passed in 2011. Now, coming back to what I was trying to mention here is the fact that this consent is going to drive the journey of privacy. The the government would like to make the industry start implementing the consent aspect when the rule comes in. Now, if you look at the rules, I foresee no major change that is to happen from the draft that was floated out in January 2025. The only aspect that looks quite worrisome for the government is the removal of IT Act Section 43A and 72A, 43A, 72A, and also whether that regulation has to be modified. IT Act, it is called the uh, I forgot the name of that regulation. It is there where consent and where there is where there's a definition of body corporate and things are concerned. That is a regulation of 2007 under the IT Act. Now, looking at all this, it looks as if that we need to make sure that the corporate starts implementing consent. Forget showing concerns for consent. Start implementing consent. And then we can take the journey of this privacy in India in a different way. Mind you, the whole world is watching us as to how we are going to implement. Yeah.
I think so. It's also time for us as India to just brace up and be the best in this journey. There's one question from the audience where they want to know that where can people find the roles and responsibility that needs to be performed by a consent manager?
Okay. If you look at the regulations, there's one schedule, there's the draft rule which has come out. There is one schedule which talks about consent manager exclusively. So I am not able to recall which is that schedule. One of the schedules talks about how the consent manager has to perform his duties, what is his role, what are the responsibilities. Now, most of these things may be very sketchy as of today, but if you look at the BRD, if you look at the BRD, it gives a large amount of dots which can be filled up to see the roles responsibility. one would do a googling, you would get a large number of these type of articles in the website. What is the duties of the consent manager? Even before the BRD could come on. But post the BRD coming in, I suggest that you read the BRD, because we don't know what industry you are in, and start making your notes of what your responsibilities, and you'll be able to do it. For me to conclude and tell you, yes, this is the roles and responsibility, would not be exhaustive, because the rules are yet to be in place. Yeah. Any other question in the audience?
Are there any, so all the participants who are here with us, if you have any question, I think we can keep the floor open for next 2 minutes for any questions if there are. Meanwhile, sir, thank you so much for showing light and covering
Pleasure.
this very important topic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I hope the audience did get some information from you.
Right. If
Thank you.
there's anything, I think you can also connect with us on our LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to have these discussions as well. So I think for today, so we can conclude the session. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.